There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with physical tiredness. You have not run anywhere. You have not lifted anything heavy. You have simply been inside your own head for too long. And somehow that feels more draining than anything the body could endure. Most people assume this is a sign of a complex mind. They wear it quietly, almost like a badge. The person who thinks deeply, who considers every angle, who never rushes to conclusions. And there is something seductive about that identity. It feels responsible. It feels careful. It feels, above all, intelligent. But here is what that story leaves out. Thinking, when it becomes compulsive, is not a sign of depth. It is a sign of distance. Distance from a feeling you are not ready to face. Distance from a decision you already know you need to make. Distance from a version of yourself that is waiting on the other side of all that noise. This is not a comfortable idea, but it is an honest one. And honesty, as the Stoics understood, is the only real starting point for any meaningful change. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, never intended for anyone else to read, that the obstacle is not outside us. It is the way we interpret what is outside us. He was not talking about positive thinking. He was talking about the gap between reality and the story we construct around it. Overthinking lives in that gap. It does not examine reality. It decorates it, complicates it, and ultimately delays our contact with it. Think about someone who has been hurt by a person they love. Not a stranger, but someone close, a parent, a partner, a friend who knew exactly where to press. The wound is real. The pain is real. But instead of sitting with that pain, the mind begins to work. Conversation. It imagines alternative versions. It constructs arguments, rehearses responses, builds elaborate theories about why the other person behaved the way they did. Hours pass, sometimes days. And here is the cruel irony. All of that mental activity feels like processing. It feels like working through something. But in most cases, it is the opposite. It is a way of staying close to the wound without ever actually touching it. The mind circles the pain endlessly, like a satellite in orbit, never landing. Carl Jung called this kind of avoidance a function of the persona, the constructed self we present to the world, and increasingly to ourselves. When the shadow, the parts of us we have not integrated, becomes too threatening to acknowledge, the ego finds other things to do. It thinks, it plans, it analyzes, anything to avoid the confrontation with what is actually there. Jung believed that the unlived life does not disappear, it accumulates, and one of the places it accumulates is in the relentless activity of a mind that refuses to be still. Modern psychology has given this a more clinical name. Researchers studying anxiety and emotional regulation have identified a pattern called cognitive avoidance, the use of abstract, repetitive thinking to suppress emotional experience. The mind, in this model, is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was trained to do. It learned, often very early in life, that feeling certain things was dangerous, that expressing certain emotions led to rejection, punishment, or abandonment. So it developed a workaround. Think instead of feel. Analyze instead of grieve. Plan instead of trust. This is not weakness. It is adaptation. But adaptation that made sense in one context can become a prison in another. A person who grew up in a household where emotional expression was treated as a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be shared. They learned to manage their feelings before anyone else could see them. They became skilled at anticipating reactions, at reading rooms, at staying one step ahead of conflict. That skill kept them safe. But it also taught them that their inner world was something to be controlled, not inhabited. Years later, they sit in a quiet room and cannot stop thinking. They are not in danger. There is no conflict to navigate, but the mind does not know that. It is still running the old program, still scanning for threats, still generating scenarios that justify its own activity. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who was born into slavery and spent his life teaching the philosophy of inner freedom, made a distinction that cuts directly to this. He said that some things are within our control and some things are not. What is within our control is our judgment, our response, our attention. What is not within our control is everything else. Other people's behavior, the past, the outcome of events we cannot determine. Overthinking in Epictetan terms is the mind refusing to accept that distinction. It keeps reaching for what is not within its control, trying to think its way into certainty about things that are inherently uncertain. And the more it reaches, the more anxious it becomes, because certainty never arrives. It cannot. That is not how life works. The question then is not how to think better. It is how to stop using thought as a substitute for something else. That something else is usually feeling. Specifically, the feelings we have learned to distrust. Grief, anger, longing, fear, love that has nowhere to go. Be solved. They are experiences to be moved through, and the mind, for all its sophistication, cannot move through them on your behalf. It can only describe them, dissect them, and ultimately delay them. There is a moment that many people recognize, even if they have never named it. It is the moment when you realize that you already know what you need to do. You have known for a while. The thinking was not helping you figure it out. It was helping you avoid the weight of knowing. Because knowing means choosing, and choosing means accepting that you cannot control what comes next. That is the real fear underneath most compulsive thinking. Not confusion, not complexity. Fear of the moment when thought ends and life begins. The Stoics did not ask people to stop thinking. They were, by any measure, rigorous thinkers. What they asked was that thinking be placed in service of action, not used as a replacement for it. Reason, in the Stoic tradition, is a tool for living well, not a shelter from living at all. Jung asked something similar, though in different language. He asked people to become conscious of what they were doing and why. Not to judge it, but to see it clearly, because what we see clearly, we can choose. What remains in the dark continues to choose for us. So if you find yourself caught in the loop, replaying, rehearsing, constructing elaborate mental architectures around a situation that has not changed in weeks, try asking a different question. Not what should I think about this, but what am I trying not to feel? The answer will not always be comfortable, it rarely is, but it will be real. And real, however difficult, is always more useful than the most sophisticated illusion the mind can build. You are not broken because you think too much. And you learn to protect yourself in the best way you knew how. But protection that outlives its purpose becomes a wall. And walls, however solid they feel, are not the same as safety. The mind that learns to be still, not empty, but still, is not a weaker mind. It is a braver one. It has stopped running from its own interior and started living there instead. That is not a small thing. For many people, it is the most difficult journey they will ever take. But it begins, as most real things do, not with more thinking, but with the willingness to stop. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.